The morning sun crept over Dust Hollow like a thief, stealing the cool of night and replacing it with the promise of another scorching day. Clara May stood at the corner of Main Street, her worn boots planted in the dust. A small basket of remedies balanced on her hip. The smell of coffee drifted from the hotel, mixing with horse sweat and the earthy scent of cattle being driven through town. She watched the world wake up shopkeepers sweeping their stoops, ranch hands stumbling out of the saloon where they'd slept off last night's whiskey. Mrs. Whitmore's carriage rolled past, kicking up a cloud that made Clara turn her face away. When she looked back, Alice Whitmore was peering at her through the curtained window, nose wrinkled like she'd caught wind of something foul. Clara straightened her patched skirt and lifted her chin. Let them look. She had remedies to sell and a brother to feed. "Fresh salves," she called out, voice steady despite the ache in her throat. "Liniment for sore muscles, tinctures for the grip." A cowboy paused, eyeing her wares. His face was weathered as old leather, kind around the eyes. "That stuff any good?" "Made it myself, sir. Learned from Mrs. Holbrook before she passed." Clara uncorked a small bottle. "Arnica and willow bark. Works better than anything from the city." He sniffed it, nodded, and dropped 2 coins in her palm. As he walked away, she heard him mutter to his companion, "Poor little thing, selling weeds on the street corner." The words stung, but Clara pocketed the coins. Pride didn't buy medicine for Henry. By noon, the sun had turned Main Street into a furnace. Clara retreated to the narrow shade between the Mercantile and the bank, counting her earnings. $7. Not enough for the doctor, but maybe enough for another week's rent and some beef broth for Henry. A commotion near the livery stable caught her attention. An elderly woman, bent nearly double with age, stumbled in the street. Her cane had caught in the rutted dirt, and she swayed dangerously. The afternoon traffic of wagons and riders continued, oblivious or uncaring. Clara didn't think. She darted forward, catching the woman's elbow just as her knees buckled. The impact jarred Clara's basket, sending bottles rolling across the dirt. "Easy now, ma'am," Clara murmured, steadying the trembling form. The woman's clothes, though faded, spoke of better days. Her clouded eyes turned toward Clara's voice. "Can't see proper anymore." The woman whispered, "My Anna usually walks with me, but she's tending her sick baby." "Where do you need to go?" Clara gathered her scattered remedies with one hand while supporting the woman with the other. "Just to the boarding house, 2 streets over." Clara bit her lip. 2 streets out of her way meant lost sales, but she couldn't leave the woman here. "I'll walk with you." They moved slowly, Clara describing the path to help the woman navigate. Halfway there, rain began to fall fat, unexpected drops that quickly became a downpour. Clara shrugged out of her thin shawl and draped it over the woman's shoulders. "You'll catch your death," the woman protested. "I'm young and strong," Clara said, though she shivered as rain soaked through her threadbare dress. "You need it more." At the boarding house steps, the woman clutched Clara's hand. "Bless you, child. Here." She fumbled in her pocket, producing a silver dollar. Clara gently closed the woman's fingers back around the coin. "Keep it for your grandbaby's medicine." She was turning to leave when she noticed a figure across the street, a tall man in a black duster, standing motionless despite the rain. His hat shadowed his face, but she felt the weight of his gaze. Something about his stillness made her uneasy. She hurried away, water streaming down her face. By the time she climbed the back stairs to their room above the saloon, Clara was soaked through. She paused outside the door, wringing water from her hair, trying to compose herself before facing Henry. "Clara," his voice came thin through the wood. "That you—" She pushed inside, smile fixed in place. "Who else would it be, the Queen of England?" Henry laughed, which turned into a cough that shook his small frame. At 12, he should have been running wild with the other boys, not lying pale and thin under a pile of quilts. Clara moved to his side, feeling his forehead. Still warm, but not burning. "I sold 5 bottles today," she said, pulling the coins from her pocket. "Tomorrow I'll get us some proper beef soup from Mrs. Murphy." "You're wet," Henry observed, catching her hand. His fingers felt like bird bones. "Got caught in that shower. Nothing to fret about." She squeezed gently. "How about I tell you a story while I work on tomorrow's batch?" She spent the evening grinding herbs by candlelight, spinning tales of cowboys and adventures while Henry dozed. The work was familiar, comforting. She'd learned it from Mrs. Holbrook in exchange for cleaning the old woman's shop. Those hands, now still in the grave, had taught her which plants eased pain, which brought down fever, which could save a life if used right. The knock came just as she was bottling the last tincture. 3 sharp raps that made her freeze. Nobody visited them. Nobody who meant good. Anyway, Miss May. The voice was male, unfamiliar, but polite. "I have correspondence for you." Clara crept to the door, keeping the chain on as she cracked it open. A man in a clerk's neat clothes stood in the dim hallway, extending an envelope. "What's this about?" "I'm instructed only to deliver it, Miss..." He tipped his hat and disappeared down the stairs. Clara held the envelope to the candle. Heavy paper, quality she'd never touched before. Her name written in bold script. Inside, a single sheet. Asterisk Miss May. Your kindness to Mrs. Chen during today's storm did not go unnoticed. I have need of someone with your particular skills at Thorn Ranch. The position of herbarium manager is available, with lodging provided for you and your brother. If interested, present this letter at the ranch gates Monday morning. E. Thorn asterisk. Clara read it 3 times, heart pounding. Thorn Ranch. Everyone knew that name. 20,000 acres of prime grazing land, 500 head of cattle, and a owner who rarely came to town. Elias Thorn, the Baron. They called him, though what made a man a baron in Colorado territory? Clara couldn't say. She looked at Henry, sleeping fitfully. Lodging provided, steady work, but also questions. Why her she was nobody. Nothing, just a girl who sold remedies on street corners. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation and worry. Clara mended their clothes, settled debts with the landlord, and tried not to build too much hope. By Monday dawn, she'd made her decision. She woke Henry gently. "We're going on an adventure," she whispered. They walked the 5 miles to Thorn Ranch as the sun climbed higher. Henry leaned on her more heavily with each step, but he didn't complain. When the gates finally came into view, tall iron things that looked like they belonged on a palace, Clara almost turned back. "Is that it?" Henry breathed. "That's it." A man emerged from a gatehouse, rifle casual in his hands. His eyes swept over them, lingering on their patched clothes and worn bags. "Help you." Clara held out the letter with steady hands. He read it, eyebrows climbing, then looked at her with new interest. "Well, I'll be damned. Pardon, Mr. Thorn said you might come." He swung the gates open. "Main house is up the road. He's expecting you." They walked between pastures so vast they seemed to meet the sky. Cattle dotted the landscape like scattered seeds. In the distance, mountains rose purple and magnificent. The main house, when it came into view, was sprawling but solid, built to last, not to impress. A figure waited on the porch. As they approached, Clara recognized the tall frame, the black duster. The man from the rain, he'd removed his hat, revealing dark hair threaded with premature silver and a face that might have been handsome if it ever smiled. "Miss May." His voice was deep, careful. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Thorn." Clara met his dark eyes, refusing to be intimidated. "Your letter was unexpected." "Good things often are." His gaze moved to Henry, and something flickered across his features. Your brother? Yes, sir, Henry. Thorne descended the steps with surprising grace for such a large man. He crouched before Henry, bringing himself to the boy's eye level. You like horses? Henry nodded eagerly. Good. A ranch without someone who loves horses is just dirt with cows on it. He straightened, addressing Clara. Doctor, Morrison will examine him this afternoon. Whatever treatment he needs, he'll have. Clara's throat tightened. Sir, I can't. The position includes medical care, non-negotiable. His tone brooked no argument. Now, let me show you the herbarium, or what will be the herbarium, once you've worked your magic. He led them around the house to a neglected garden plot. Weeds choked what had once been ordered beds. A small greenhouse stood empty, its windows clouded but unbroken. My wife planted this, Thorne said quietly. She died 3 years ago. I haven't had the heart to tend it, but I can't bear to let it die completely. Clara knelt, brushing soil through her fingers. Good earth, just waiting. I can bring it back. I believe you can. He studied her with those intense eyes. The cabin's through those trees. 2 rooms, sound roof, wood stove. You'll take your meals in the main house kitchen if you choose. Questions? 1,000 of them. But Clara voiced only one. Why me? Thorne was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, because you gave what you couldn't spare to someone who couldn't repay you. That's the kind of person I want on my land. He turned and walked back to the house, leaving Clara kneeling in the dirt with hope looming dangerous in her chest. The cabin smelled of pine resin and old smoke when Clara pushed open the door. 2 rooms. Just as Thorne had said, a main room with a cook stove and rough table. A smaller room with 2 narrow beds. Everything was clean but spare, like someone had prepared it without knowing who would live there. It's perfect, Henry breathed, running his hand along the wooden walls. Clara set down their meager belonging, trying to see it through his eyes instead of comparing it to places they'd been turned away from. Help me air out the bedding while it's sunny. Doctor. Morrison arrived that afternoon as promised, a thin man with gentle hands and shrewd eyes behind wire spectacles. He examined Henry thoroughly while Clara hovered, answering questions about the boy's symptoms. When he finally packed his bag, his expression was grave but not hopeless. Consumption, early stages, he said quietly. The dry air here will help. Regular food, rest, and proper medicine. He glanced at Clara's worried face. He's young, with care. He could recover fully. After he left, Clara stood in the doorway watching Henry explore their new home. The weight that had pressed on her chest for months eased just a fraction. Hope was dangerous, but she couldn't help feeling it unfurl inside her like a new leaf. The next morning, she attacked the garden with fierce determination. Years of neglect had left it wild. But beneath the tangle she found traces of its former glory, lavender struggling under bindweed, rosemary gone woody but alive, sage spreading in defiant gray-green patches. She worked until her hands blistered, clearing and sorting, saving what could be saved. You trying to finish it all in one day? Clara looked up to find a young man watching her, amusement dancing in his brown eyes. He was perhaps 25, with the easy stance of someone comfortable in his own skin. Just making a start, she said, pushing hair back with a dirty hand. I'm Joshua Reed. I work with the horses mostly. But, Mr. Thorne asked me to check if you needed anything. His smile was warm, uncomplicated. Looks like you could use some proper tools. These are fine. She held up the rusty trowel she'd found in the greenhouse. Sure, if you want to be here till Christmas. He grinned. Come on, tool shed's this way. The shed was a revelation, neat rows of implements, most barely used. Joshua helped her select what she needed, chatting easily about the ranch, the other hands, the rhythm of life at Thorne. Fair warning, he said as they loaded a wheelbarrow. Some of the boys aren't too happy about a woman doing this work, especially Marcus Cole. He figured his cousin would get the job. Clara's shoulders tensed. I'll stay out of their way. Hey now, I'm not saying you should. Just watch yourself around Marcus. He holds grudges like some men hold whiskey. Over the following days, Clara established a routine. Dawn in the garden before the heat grew fierce. Afternoons preparing remedies in the greenhouse she'd scrubbed clean. Evenings with Henry, watching color return slowly to his cheeks as regular meals and medicine did their work. The ranch hands mostly ignored her, though she felt their eyes when she passed. Marcus Cole made a point of spitting tobacco juice near her feet whenever their paths crossed. But there were kind ones too, Amos, the old chuck wagon cook who saved her the best cuts of meat, and Tommy, a boy of 10 who technically belonged to nobody but whom everyone looked after. My ma died birthing me, Tommy told her one afternoon, helping her transplant seedlings. Mister, Thorne lets me stay long as I work. I feed chickens and gather eggs. That's important work, Clara said seriously. Tommy beamed. Mister, Thorne says that too. He's not mean like people say, just sad. Clara glanced toward the main house where Thorne's office window overlooked the garden. She'd caught glimpses of him there, a dark silhouette watching her work. He rarely spoke to her directly, but evidence of his attention appeared in small ways, new lumber appearing when the greenhouse bench broke. A medical book left on her doorstep when Henry developed a new cough. The first real storm struck 2 weeks after their arrival. Clara woke to wind howling like a living thing, rain driving sideways against the windows. She rushed out to find her carefully tended seedlings drowning in the deluge, the greenhouse door banging open. She fought through the mud, trying to save what she could. Rain plastered her hair to her head, turned her dress to a sodden weight. The wind tore at her hands as she struggled to secure the greenhouse door. Stubborn woman. Strong hands suddenly joined hers on the door. Elias Thorne, soaked to the skin, helped her wrestle it closed. Together they worked to cover the most vulnerable plants, using whatever they could find: old boards, feed sacks, even Thorne's own coat. When they finally stumbled into the greenhouse, Clara was shivering so hard her teeth chattered. Thorne looked at her with something like exasperation. You should have waited till morning. Morning would have been too late. She wrung water from her skirts. Those seedlings are the only feverfew I have, if Henry's cough worsens. Here. He shrugged out of his wet jacket and draped it around her shoulders. It smelled of leather and rain and something uniquely him. There's coffee in the kitchen. Get warm before you catch your own death. He strode back into the storm before she could protest. Clara stood there, dripping onto the greenhouse floor, wearing the jacket of the most powerful man in 3 counties. The weight of it felt like armor and trap all at once. By morning, the storm had passed. Clara ventured out to survey the damage, heart sinking at the flattened plants and washed-out beds. But there beside the greenhouse sat neat coils of wire, sturdy stakes, and canvas for protective covers. No note, but she knew. He does that, Joshua said, appearing with more supplies. Fixes things in the night like some kind of fairy tale. Lost half his roof in a storm once, and instead of calling us to help, he patched it himself by lantern light. Clara fingered the canvas. Why? Joshua shrugged. Man doesn't like to owe anybody anything. Doesn't like anybody owing him either. Makes it complicated when he helps folks. Complicated. Yes, that was the word for it. Clara threw herself into rebuilding, working until her muscles screamed and her mind quieted. She didn't want to think about kindness that came with no price, about dark eyes that saw too much, about the way that jacket had felt like an embrace. Marcus chose the 3rd week to make his move. Clara was alone in the greenhouse, grinding peppermint for stomach remedies. When the door banged open, well, the charity case, hard at work. She didn't look up. Did you need something, Mr. Cole? Mr. Cole. He mimicked her tone. Ain't you proper? Too proper for saloon work, but not too proud to take handouts from the boss. Clara's hand stilled on the mortar and pestle. I work for my wages, same as you. That what you call it? He moved closer, bringing the stink of whiskey and mean intentions. Work. Seems to me you're working something else, batting those eyes, playing helpless in the storm. She stood slowly, keeping the heavy pestle in her hand. You're drunk. Leave now. His face flushed ugly red. Don't you tell me? Marcus! The voice cracked like a whip. Silas Gray stood in the doorway, older and steadier than most of the hands. Boss wants you checking the south fence line. Marcus's jaw worked like he was chewing nails. This ain't over, he muttered, shouldering past Silas. Clara's knees wanted to buckle, but she stayed upright. Silas studied her for a long moment. You all right, miss? Yes, thank you. He nodded once. Marcus is a fool, but he's not always wrong. People talk, you being here, Thorne watching over you. It looks like something it maybe isn't, or maybe is. Either way, you should know there's talk. After he left, Clara sank onto the bench. Talk. Of course there was talk. A single woman, a wealthy man, a job that came from nowhere. She looked at her hands, stained green from herbs, calloused from honest work. Let them talk. She had bigger worries than gossip. That evening, she found a package on her doorstep. Inside, wrapped in brown paper, was a sturdy new dress, practical blue cotton with no frills, and a pair of work gloves. The note said simply, For the garden, tea. Clara held the dress up, torn between gratitude and alarm. It would make her work easier, last longer than her threadbare clothes. But gifts like this fed the talk Silas had warned about. She could return it, make clear she wanted no special treatment. Is that for you? Henry asked from the doorway. He looked better every day, cheeks filling out, eyes brighter. Mr. Thorne sent it, for gardening. Henry fingered the sturdy fabric. Ma would have said it's foolish to refuse help when you need it. Pride fills no stomachs. From the mouths of babes. Clara folded the dress carefully. She'd wear it for work, nothing more. A tool, like the spades and stakes. Nothing to set tongues wagging worse than they already were. That night, she stood at her window watching lights burn late in the main house. Sometimes she caught glimpses of Thorne pacing past windows, or standing on the porch staring out at the dark land. What ghosts haunted him? What made a man build walls so high that even kindness had to sneak out in darkness? Not her concern, she told herself firmly. She was here for Henry, for the chance to build something stable. Whatever Elias Thorne was working out in his midnight wanderings, it had nothing to do with her. But sometimes, when she found fresh lumber appearing just when she needed it, or noticed how the toughest ranch hands went gentle around Tommy after Thorne's quiet words, she wondered if maybe it did, if maybe they were all part of some design only he could see, pieces being moved by a careful hand towards some redemption none of them yet understood. The Dust Hollow Spring Festival arrived with the fanfare of a brass band and the smell of fresh-baked pies. Clara stood before the cracked mirror in their cabin, smoothing the blue work dress, the one Thorne had given her for gardening. It was the best she had, though compared to what the town ladies would wear, she might as well be dressed in feed sacks. You look pretty, Henry said from his bed. Doctor. Morrison had forbidden him from attending, though his health had improved remarkably. Like Ma used to on Sundays. Clara kissed his forehead. I'll bring you back something sweet. Maybe Mrs. Murphy will have those molasses cookies you like. Why are you entering the flower contest? Henry asked. You know those town ladies won't play fair. Clara adjusted the wildflower bouquet she'd assembled prairie roses, yarrow, and sage bound with grass instead of ribbon. Because we belong here now, it's time folks knew it. The walk to town took 40 minutes. By the time she reached Main Street, the festival was in full swing. Booths lined the square. Children ran between legs, and fiddle music spilled from the gazebo. Clara kept her chin high as she made her way to the competition tent, though she felt the weight of every stare. The flower arrangement contest was the domain of Dust Hollow's social queens. Alice Whitmore held court near the judge's table, her elaborate rose display drawing admiring murmurs. When she spotted Clara, her perfect mouth curved in a smile sharp as broken glass. "Why, Clara May, how brave of you to enter." Alice's companions tittered behind gloved hands. "Though I'm not sure weeds qualify as flower arrangements." "They're wildflowers," Clara said quietly, setting her bouquet on the designated table. "They grow where roses can't." "How poetic, and how appropriate." Alice's voice carried just far enough. "Some things simply belong in their natural environment, don't you think? No matter how hard they might try to rise above it." Clara's hands stayed steady as she adjusted her arrangement, though heat climbed her neck. Other contestants pretended not to notice the exchange, but she could feel their judgment like needles. The judging took an hour. Clara used the time to walk the festival, buying penny candy for Henry and admiring quilts she couldn't afford. Everywhere she went, whispers followed. The Baron's charity case, that woman from the saloon, getting above herself. When the judges called for contestants to gather, Clara almost didn't go, but something stubborn in her spine, the same thing that had kept her standing through every hard night, propelled her forward. "Third place goes to Mrs. Franklin for her lovely daisies," the head judge announced. "Second place, Miss Harriet Cole for her iris arrangement." Clara started to turn away. Of course. She'd been foolish to think. And first place, in a unanimous decision, goes to Miss Clara May for her creative use of native flora. The silence was deafening. Clara stood frozen as the judge held out the blue ribbon. Around her, she could hear the sharp intake of breath, the muttered disbelief. Alice Whitmore's face had gone white as bleached muslin. "This is a mistake," Alice said loudly. "Surely the judges can't be serious. Those are weeds. Common roadside weeds." "They're expertly arranged examples of our local heritage." The judge, old Mr. Paulson, who'd run the bank for 30 years, said firmly, "The contest rules say nothing about requiring cultivated flowers." Clara accepted the ribbon with numb fingers. For one shining moment, she felt what it might be like to simply belong, to be seen for her work rather than her station. Then Alice moved. Later, Clara would wonder if it was calculated or impulse. Either way. The result was the same. Alice's elbow caught a glass of lemonade on the table, sending it cascading across Clara's dress and arrangement. The yellow liquid soaked into the blue fabric, dripped from the destroyed flowers. "Oh!" Alice's hand flew to her mouth in theatrical dismay. "How clumsy of me. Though, really, it hardly matters, does it? That dress has seen better days anyway." The laughter started low, but built like a wave. Clara stood there, dripping and humiliated, holding her ruined bouquet. The blue ribbon in her hand felt like mockery now. She bent slowly, gathering the scattered flowers, trying to salvage even one bloom. "That's quite enough." The voice cut through the laughter like a scythe through wheat. Elias Thorne stood at the edge of the crowd, and the look on his face could have frozen hell itself. He moved through the parting crowd with deliberate steps, shrugging out of his black duster coat as he walked. Without a word, he draped it around Clara's shoulders, covering the stained dress. His hands lingered just a moment, steadying her. Then he turned to face the crowd, and when he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the square. "My ranch needs a woman like you." The words rang out clear and unmistakable. Not a girl, not a worker, a woman like you. The implications hung in the air heavy as summer thunder. Clara felt the crowd's attention shift, crackling with new speculation. Beside her, Alice had gone from white to red, her mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. "Miss May has brought my late wife's garden back from the dead." Thorne continued, his dark eyes sweeping the crowd. She saved 3 of my best horses with her remedies, and she did it all while caring for her sick brother, never asking for special treatment, never complaining. If that's not the kind of person we should be celebrating at our festivals, then perhaps it's the festival that needs changing. He offered Clara his arm. She hesitated only a moment before taking it, letting him lead her through the silent crowd. Behind them, whispers erupted like fire in dry grass. They didn't speak until they reached the edge of town where he'd left his horse and wagon. Only then did Clara find her voice. "You shouldn't have done that. Someone needed to—" He helped her onto the wagon seat, his touch carefully impersonal now. They had no right. "I don't mean that." She clutched his coat around her shoulders, smelling leather and sage. "The way you said it, what you said, people will think." "Let them think." His jaw was tight. "I'm tired of watching good people get ground down by small minds." "But your reputation—" "My reputation," he laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm the Baron who buried his wife and turned into a hermit. They already tell stories about me. At least now they'll be interesting ones." The ride back to the ranch was quiet, except for the creak of wheels and the distant howl of a coyote. Clara tried to sort through the tangle of emotions: humiliation, gratitude, fear, and something else she didn't dare name. "I'll wash your coat," she said when they reached her cabin. "Keep it," he said shortly. "The nights are getting cold." He was gone before she could protest, leaving her standing there wearing a coat that probably cost more than she'd made in her entire life. Inside, Henry was waiting, eyes bright with curiosity. "What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." Clara sank onto a chair, suddenly exhausted. "Mr. Thorne made a scene, called me a woman his ranch needs, right in front of everyone." Henry's eyes went wide. "Are you getting married?" "No." The word came out sharper than intended. "No, nothing like that. He was just defending me. Alice Whitmore ruined my flowers and my dress, and he got angry." But even as she said it, she knew it was more. The way he'd said those words, the choice of them, the public declaration, it all meant something. She just wasn't sure what, or whether she wanted to know. That night, word reached the ranch. Clara could see it in the way the hands looked at her differently at supper. Some with respect, others with speculation. Marcus Cole's expression was thunderous. Joshua offered her a gentle smile and an extra portion of stew, while Silas watched her with those careful eyes. "Heard there was some excitement in town," Amos said, ladling gravy. "Good for Mr. Thorne. Speaking up, man's been silent too long." "Nothing happened," Clara said quickly. "Just a misunderstanding about the flower contest." "Misunderstanding?" Silas's tone was dry. "That what they're calling it when a man stakes a public claim?" Clara's face burned. "He didn't stake anything. He was being kind." "If you say so, miss." But she could see none of them believed it. Later, alone in her cabin, Clara fingered the blue ribbon she'd salvaged. First place, for a few minutes. She'd won something on her own merit. Then Thorne had to go and complicate it, turn it into something else, something bigger and more dangerous than a simple flower contest. She understood his anger. She'd felt it herself, that rage at unfairness. But he was a man with power. When he spoke, the world had to listen. When she spoke, she was just another poor woman getting above herself. Now she was something else the woman Elias Thorne had claimed his ranch needed. The words would follow her everywhere, changing how people saw her. Some would think her a fortune hunter. Others would pity her as another conquest for a rich man's whims. Few would see what she wanted them to see, just Clara, trying to build something good from nothing. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She opened the door to find Tommy, clutching a bundle of slightly crushed wildflowers. "These are for you," he said shyly. "I picked them behind the barn. Thought maybe you could make another arrangement, since yours got ruined." Clara knelt to his level. accepting the flowers like they were made of gold. "They're perfect. Tommy, thank you." "Mr. Thorne was real mad," Tommy said. "I never seen him like that. All cold and proper, but with fire underneath. Silas says it's 'cause he's sweet on you." "Silas talks too much," Clara said gently. "Mr. Thorne was just standing up for what's right." "Maybe." Tommy scuffed his boot in the dirt. "But he don't usually care about right and wrong in town. Only out here. I think you're different." After Tommy left, Clara arranged the wildflowers in a tin cup, setting them on the table where they caught the lamplight. Different, special, needed. All words that could lift you up or trap you, depending on who spoke them and why. Through her window, she could see lights burning in the main house. Was Thorne pacing his study, regretting his public declaration, or was he planning something else? Some new way to upset the careful balance between them. She touched the coat still hanging on the back of her chair. Tomorrow she'd return it, make clear she wanted no special treatment, no public claims, nothing but the job she'd been hired to do. She'd weather the gossip like she'd weathered everything else with dignity and determination. But tonight, with the memory of his voice saying, "My ranch needs a woman like you," still echoing in her ears, she allowed herself just a moment to wonder what it might mean if he'd meant it exactly the way it sounded. The days following the festival passed in a strange new rhythm. Clara threw herself into her work with doubled fervor, expanding the herb garden and filling the greenhouse with remedies. Ranch hands who'd barely acknowledged her before now tipped their hats when she passed. Some, like Joshua, went out of their way to help her carry supplies or repair broken planks. Others, particularly Marcus and his circle, watched her with calculating eyes that made her skin crawl. Tommy had become her constant shadow, following her through the gardens and peppering her with questions about plants and their uses. His eager presence was a comfort, a buffer against the weight of speculation that followed her everywhere. "Why do you put the comfrey next to the potatoes?" he asked one morning, helping her spread mulch. "Comfrey roots go deep," Clara explained, showing him the plant's broad leaves. "They bring up nutrients that potatoes can't reach. Plants can be friends, just like people." "Is that why Mr. Thorne put you here, to be friends with the ranch?" Children had a way of cutting straight to the heart of things. Clara kept her hands busy, not meeting his eyes. "I'm here to work the garden, nothing more." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. Something had shifted since the festival. Thorne still kept his distance, but his presence seemed to hover at the edges of her day. Fresh lumber would appear just when she needed it. The ranch's best-laying hens mysteriously migrated to a coop near her cabin. Small kindnesses that required no acknowledgement but spoke volumes. The first test came at the weekly ranch supper. Clara usually ate in the kitchen with Tommy, avoiding the communal meals where the hands gathered. But tonight, Amos insisted. "Can't hide forever, miss," he said, not unkindly. "Besides, I made pot roast. Be ashamed to waste it on just Tommy and me." The conversation died when she entered the dining hall. 20 pairs of eyes tracked her movement to an empty seat. The silence stretched until Joshua cleared his throat. "Pass the biscuits. Would you, Sam?" Slowly, painfully. Conversation resumed. Clara kept her eyes on her plate, aware of every glance and whispered comment. She was halfway through her meal when Joshua stood, moving to the empty chair beside her. "Mind if I sit?" Before she could answer, he was settling in, launching into a story about a ornery stallion that had given him trouble all day. His easy manner drew others into the conversation, creating a bubble of normalcy around her. Clara felt a rush of gratitude for his kindness. It wasn't until after supper, when the hands had dispersed to their evening chores, that Joshua caught her alone by the water pump. "Clara," he began, and something in his tone made her stomach drop. "I've been meaning to speak with you." She busied herself with the pump handle. "Oh, I know this might not be the right time, what with all the talk and such, but..." He removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "I've been thinking. You need stability, protection from all this gossip. Henry needs a father figure. And well, I think you're a fine woman." Clara's hand stilled on the pump. "Joshua, hear me out." His earnest brown eyes met hers. "I'm not talking about some grand romance. I know you don't feel that way about me, but we could make a good partnership. I'd treat you right, give Henry a good home. You wouldn't have to worry about what people say anymore." A practical proposal from a good man. 6 months ago, she might have wept with gratitude for such an offer. Now, standing in the shadow of the main house where lamplight was just beginning to glow, she felt only a gentle sadness. "You're a good man, Joshua Reed," she said softly. "You deserve a woman who looks at you the way you're looking at me now. That woman isn't me." He nodded, disappointed, but not surprised. "It's him, isn't it, Thorne?" "There's nothing between Mr. Thorne and me." "Maybe not yet." Joshua settled his hat back on his head. "But there's something. Just be careful. Clara, he's a complicated man carrying heavy ghosts. I'd hate to see you hurt." After he left, Clara stood in the gathering darkness, Joshua's words echoing in her mind. Complicated. Everyone said that about Thorne, as if it explained everything and nothing all at once. The week wore on, tension building like storm clouds. Marcus's hostility grew bolder, accidentally knocking over her remedy bottles, letting his horse stray through her newly planted beds. Clara gritted her teeth and replanted, rebuilt, refused to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Then came the night everything unraveled. Clara woke to Henry's labored breathing, worse than it had been in weeks. His skin burned with fever, and the cough that had been improving suddenly sounded wet and frightening. She flew into action, mixing remedies with shaking hands, willow bark for fever, horehound for the cough. But she needed something stronger. In her greenhouse grew foxglove, powerful but dangerous, requiring precise dosing. The plant doctor, Morrison, had specifically told her to cultivate but warned her to use with extreme care. As she worked, crushing leaves and measuring doses, she didn't notice the shadow at her window or hear the soft footsteps retreating into darkness. By dawn, Henry's fever had broken. Clara sat beside his bed, exhausted but relieved, when pounding on her door made her jump. "Open up, ranch business." She recognized Silas's voice and opened the door to find him flanked by Marcus and 2 other hands. Marcus's face wore a triumphant smirk that made her blood run cold. "Need to search your cabin, miss," Silas said, clearly uncomfortable. "Money's gone missing from the strongbox." "That's ridiculous." Clara blocked the doorway. "I haven't been near the main house." "Maybe not," Marcus drawled. "But you've been mighty free with ranch supplies. Seen you sneaking around at night, taking things. Medicine for my brother." "Move aside, miss." Silas's tone was firm, but not unkind. "Let's get this done quick." They searched with ruthless efficiency, while Clara stood frozen, arms wrapped around herself. Henry watched from his bed with frightened eyes. When Marcus emerged from her small storage area holding a leather pouch, her heart stopped. Well, he jingled it, and the unmistakable sound of coins rang out. "Hidden behind the remedy jars. Guess healing folks pays better than we thought." "That's not mine," Clara said, voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. "Someone put it there." "Sure they did." Marcus's grin widened. "Just like someone else has been stealing supplies and selling remedies made with ranch herbs in town. Mr. Thorne gave me permission." "Did he, in writing with witnesses?" Marcus stepped closer. "Or was it more of those private understandings you two seem to have?" Silas held up a hand. "Enough. We'll let Thorne sort this out." He turned to Clara, something like pity in his eyes. "Best you come quiet, miss, for the boy's sake." Clara looked at Henry, pale and frightened in his bed. "Let me get someone to watch him." I'll stay, Tommy said from the doorway, small face fierce with loyalty. I'll take care of him. Miss Clara, don't you worry. The walk to the main house felt like a funeral march. Word had spread, and hands gathered to watch her pass. Some looked satisfied, others troubled. Joshua stood near the barn, his face tight with anger, but at whom she couldn't tell. Thorne waited in his study, back to them as he stared out the window. When he turned, his face was carved from stone, showing nothing. "Sir," Silas began, "we found—" "I know what you found." Thorne's voice was flat. "Leave us." The men filed out, Marcus shooting Clara one last vindictive look. When the door closed, the silence stretched between them like a chasm. "I didn't take it," Clara said. "The evidence suggests otherwise." "The evidence was planted." She stepped forward, desperate to make him understand. "You know me. You know I wouldn't—" "Do I?" He moved to his desk, movements controlled. "What do I really know about you, Miss May, beyond what you've chosen to show me?" The words hit like a slap. "You know I care for my brother. You know I work hard. You know—" "I know you were desperate when you came here." His dark eyes were unreadable. Desperate people do desperate things. "Not this!" Her voice broke. "I would never steal from you. Never." He studied her for a long moment, then turned back to the window. "Go back to your cabin. Stay there while I decide what to do." "Elias." "That's Mr. Thorne to you?" The coldness in his voice could have frozen fire. "Go!" Clara left on unsteady legs, feeling like the ground had opened beneath her feet. The man who'd defended her publicly, who'd covered her with his coat, who'd seen her worth when no one else would, he believed the worst of her now, just like everyone else. Back at the cabin, she found Tommy trying to spoon broth into Henry's mouth. Her brother reached for her weakly. "Clara, what's happening?" "Nothing for you to worry about." She smoothed his hair, fighting tears. "Just a misunderstanding." But as night fell and no word came from the main house, she knew it was more than that. Trust, once broken, might never mend, and without Thorne's protection, she and Henry would be back where they started worse, because now they'd be branded thieves as well as charity cases. She sat by Henry's bed as he slept fitfully, planning. They could leave at dawn, take what little they owned and try for another town. It would kill Henry to travel in his condition, but staying might be worse. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. She opened the door to find Elias Thorne standing in the darkness, holding a bundle of prairie sage. "For your brother," he said quietly. "Morrison mentioned it helps with lung complaints." Clara stared at the medicinal plant, confusion warring with hurt. "Why?" "Because whatever else is true, the boy is innocent." He set the sage on her doorstep. "And because I needed to see if you'd run." "Is that what this was a test?" No. For the first time, his controlled mask slipped, showing a glimpse of anguish beneath. "This was me being a coward and a fool. Marcus took the money. Tommy saw him near the strongbox last week but was afraid to speak up. The boy finally told me an hour ago." Relief and anger battled in Clara's chest. "You believed him over me." "I believed my own fears." He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking exhausted. "It's easier to expect betrayal than to risk trust." "I'm sorry, Clara, deeply sorry." She wanted to rage at him, to make him feel the pain of being doubted by someone whose opinion mattered. Instead, she picked up the sage, inhaling its sharp, clean scent. "Your wife," she said quietly. "She betrayed you somehow." He stiffened. "That's not—" "It is." Clara met his eyes. "Because you're not really seeing me. You're seeing her, waiting for me to prove you right about not trusting again." The silence stretched between them, heavy with truth. Finally, Thorne nodded once, sharply. "You're right, and you deserve better." He turned to leave, then paused. Marcus will be gone by morning. The money will be returned. Your position here is secure, if you still want it. After he left, Clara sat in the darkness, holding the sage. The night air was cold and clear, carrying the distant howl of coyotes and the closer sounds of the ranch settling for sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, Marcus's friends seeking revenge, the other Hans's reactions. Her own tangled feelings about a man who could wound her so deeply. But tonight, Henry breathed easier with each passing hour, and the medicinal sage in her hand spoke of a different kind of offering, not charity or obligation, but something harder and more precious, the first fragile attempt at trust between two people who'd forgotten how to give it. The morning after Marcus's departure, the ranch felt different. Clara could sense it in the sideways glances, the hushed conversations that died when she approached. Some hands looked at her with newfound respect. She'd survived Marcus's scheme and Thorne's doubt. Others, friends of Marcus, radiated hostility like heat from a forge. She kept her head high and tended her gardens, but the poisonous atmosphere grew thicker each day. Tools went missing from her greenhouse. Her remedy bottles were found smashed against rocks. Once, she discovered salt poured over a section of newly sprouted herbs, killing them overnight. "You should tell Mr. Thorne," Tommy insisted, helping her clear the damaged plants. "No." Clara's voice was firm. "I won't go running to him every time something goes wrong." But the harassment escalated. A week after Marcus left, Clara found her cabin door standing open. The interior ransacked. Nothing stolen, but the message was clear: you're not safe here. That night, she sat up with a kitchen knife close at hand, every creak of wood making her heart race. Henry, still recovering but stronger each day, watched her with worried eyes. "Maybe we should leave," he whispered. "No." Clara gripped his hand. "We don't run from bullies." The breaking point came 3 nights later. Clara woke to voices outside her cabin, low and menacing. Through the window, she could see 3 figures, faces hidden by darkness. "Come out, thief," one called. "Time to settle accounts." Clara's hands shook as she loaded the old rifle Amos had quietly left for her. "Go away. I don't want trouble." Too late for that. Something struck the door hard. "Marcus was our friend. You cost him his livelihood." Another blow rattled the door. Clara raised the rifle, praying she wouldn't have to use it. Then, cutting through the night like salvation, came the thunder of approaching hooves. "Step away from that cabin." Elias Thorne's voice was deadly quiet. "Now." Clara peered through the window to see him mounted on his black stallion, rifle across his saddle. Behind him, Silas and Joshua appeared from the shadows, similarly armed. The 3 harassers hesitated. Then one spat on the ground. "This ain't over." "Yes, it is." Thorne dismounted in one fluid motion. "Pack your things. You're done here. You can't fire us for... I can fire you for threatening my people." He stepped into the lamplight from Clara's window, and his face was terrible in its controlled fury. "You have 1 hour." After they slunk away, Thorne turned to Clara's door. "Are you hurt?" She opened it slowly, still clutching the rifle. "No, we're fine." His eyes swept over her, taking in the weapon, her pale face. Henry peering from behind her. Something shifted in his expression. "This is my fault," he said quietly. "I should have anticipated." "Stop." Clara lowered the rifle. "Their choices aren't your fault, or mine." Nevertheless, he looked at Silas and Joshua. "From now on, someone patrols near this cabin at night." "I don't need..." "Please." The words seemed torn from him. "Let me do this much." The next morning, Clara emerged to find a new reality. The troublemakers were gone. But the cost was clear: the ranch was divided. Those loyal to Thorne stood with Clara, but others muttered about favoritism and women bringing discord to men's work. Clara threw herself into preparing for the autumn harvest. working until exhaustion quieted her churning thoughts. The herb garden had never been more productive. She filled the greenhouse with drying plants, prepared tinctures and salves, even started a small medicinal garden near the bunkhouse for the hands to use. It was there that Tommy made his discovery. "Miss Clara!" He came running, face flushed with excitement. "Look what I found!" He held out a leather pouch similar to the one planted in her cabin, but older, more worn. Inside were coins. Yes, but also something else. A folded paper. Clara's blood chilled as she read the cramped writing. It was a letter from Marcus to someone in Dust Hollow, promising to take care of the woman problem in exchange for money. The implications were staggering. "Where did you find this?" "In the old tack room. Marcus must have forgot it when he left so quick." Clara stared at the evidence. Someone in town had paid Marcus to get rid of her. But who and why? She was still puzzling over it when Elias appeared, drawn by Tommy's excited chatter. His face darkened as he read the letter. "Do you recognize the writing?" Clara asked. "No, but the payment." He studied the coins. "These are from the bank. New minting. Whoever wrote this has money." Their eyes met, sharing the same thought. Alice Whitmore, or someone in her circle, furious about the festival incident. "I'll handle this," Thorne said. "No." Clara took the letter back. "We'll handle it. Together." Something flickered in his eyes' surprise, perhaps approval. "What do you suggest?" "We go to town, publicly. Make it clear that schemes against me are schemes against Thorne Ranch." A slow smile curved his lips, the first real smile she'd seen from him. "You're proposing we walk into the lion's den together?" "Unless you're afraid of what people will say." "I stopped caring about that the day I spoke up at the festival." He offered her his arm, formal as any gentleman. "Shall we go scandalize Dust Hollow?" "Miss May." The ride to town felt different with Thorne beside her on the wagon seat. He handled the reins with easy competence, occasionally pointing out landmarks or sharing stories of the ranch's history, without his usual guard-up. He was surprisingly good company, dry humor emerging in unexpected moments. "See that rock formation?" He indicated a cluster of red stones. "Tommy's convinced it's a sleeping dragon. Makes elaborate plans to avoid waking it." Clara smiled. "He told me it guards treasure." "Did he mention the treasure is my wife's old jewelry box? He buried it there last year for safekeeping." His voice carried fond exasperation. "The boy has more imagination than sense sometimes." "He adores you." "The feeling's mutual." Thorne's hands tightened slightly on the reins. Well, he makes the place less empty." Clara heard what he didn't say, that Tommy was the child he'd never had, or perhaps had lost. Another piece of the puzzle that was Elias Thorne. Dust Hollow's reaction to their arrival was everything Clara expected. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Women clutched their shopping baskets closer. Men stepped out of shops to stare. Thorne helped her down from the wagon with perfect courtesy, keeping her hand on his arm as they walked toward the bank. Clara felt like she was in a play, performing the role of a respectable woman while the audience whispered their reviews. Inside the bank, Mr. Paulson. The same judge from the flower contest greeted them with professional warmth that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Thorne, Miss May, how can I help you?" Thorne placed the coins on the counter. "We need to trace these. They were used in an attempted crime against Miss May." Paulson's face went carefully neutral as he examined them. "These are from our special minting for the Whitmore account, but I couldn't possibly—" "Of course not." Thorne's smile was sharp as winter ice. "But perhaps you could let Mrs. Whitmore know we're aware of her interest in ranch affairs. I'd hate for any further misunderstandings to affect her husband's cattle contracts." The threat was velvet-wrapped but unmistakable. Paulson swallowed hard. "I'll pass along your message." Outside, Clara exhaled slowly. "You just declared war on the most powerful family in town. They declared it first when they targeted you. He guided her past the millinery shop where faces pressed against glass. Besides, the Whitmores need my beef contracts more than I need their approval. They made several more stops, the general store for supplies, the newspaper office where Thorne placed an advertisement for new ranch hands who could work alongside all members of our community. Each interaction was a small battle, won through Thorne's implacable presence and Clara's quiet dignity. At the apothecary, Old Doctor, Morrison greeted them warmly. "Clara, I've been hoping you'd stop by. Several ladies have been asking about your remedies. Would you consider selling some through my shop?" Clara blinked in surprise. Yes, of course." "Excellent. Mrs. Patterson swears your salve cured her rheumatism, and the Hendricks want more of that cough syrup." He winked. "Seems your reputation is spreading despite certain parties' best efforts." As they arranged the details, Clara felt a shift, tiny but significant. Not everyone in Dust Hollow stood against her. There were cracks in the wall of prejudice where kindness could grow. The confrontation came as they prepared to leave. Alice Whitmore swept from the hotel, flanked by her usual coterie. Her perfect face was marred by spots of high color. "Mr. Thorne." She ignored Clara entirely. "I heard the most distressing rumor about threats being made in the bank." "Not threats, Mrs. Whitmore. Clarity." Thorne's voice was pleasant, terrifying in its mildness. "I believe in protecting what's mine. The ranch, the people who work it, their welfare and safety, all under my protection. Anyone who threatens that threatens me. I trust I'm clear." Alice's composure cracked slightly. "Are you actually claiming that this person is under your protection?" "Miss May is my herbarium manager and a valued member of Thorne Ranch." He shifted slightly, subtly placing himself between Alice and Clara. "Any schemes against her will be met with the full weight of my resources, legal and otherwise." The two faced off like gunfighters, violence humming in the air despite their civil tones. Finally, Alice stepped back. "You're making a mistake, aligning yourself with her kind." "The only mistake," Thorne said softly, "would be underestimating either of us." He helped Clara onto the wagon, and they departed, leaving Alice standing in the street like a statue of thwarted fury. They rode in silence until Dust Hollow disappeared behind them. Then Clara spoke. "Thank you." "Don't thank me for basic decency. It's more than that." She studied his profile, strong nose, firm jaw, lines carved by loss and weather. "You risked your standing for me. Again." "My standing?" He laughed, short and bitter. "You mean my reputation as the hermit baron who went mad with grief, that standing?" "You're not mad." "No." He glanced at her. "I talk to my dead wife sometimes. Still set her place at dinner on bad days. Keep her greenhouse like a shrine. What would you call that?" "Human," Clara said simply. He pulled the horses to a stop, turning to face her fully. "You're not afraid of me." "Should I be? Most people are. The money, the moods, the reputation." His dark eyes searched hers. "But you've never been, have you? Even that first day, soaking wet and shivering, you looked me in the eye like an equal." "Because that's what we are. Strip away the money and land. We're just two people trying to survive our ghosts." Something shifted in his face, walls crumbling, defenses falling. "Clara." "Don't." She touched his hand lightly. "Not yet. There's too much between us, gratitude, obligation, this mess with the town. When you're ready to see me without all that, then we'll talk." He covered her hand with his, just for a moment. "You're wise beyond your years." "No, just careful. I've been someone's salvation before. It didn't end well." They returned to the ranch to find organized chaos. Word had spread about the morning's harassers, and the loyal hands had called in friends. New faces filled the yard, Men looking for work who didn't care about gossip. Only fair wages and honest dealing. Looks like your advertisement worked fast. Clara observed. Good news travels when it wants to. Thorne helped her down, hands lingering slightly at her waist. Will you dine with us tonight? Tommy would be thrilled, and I would enjoy the company. It was the first personal invitation he'd extended. Clara knew accepting would fan more gossip, cement her position as the woman under Thorne's protection. But looking at his face open and hopeful in a way she'd never seen, she couldn't refuse. I'll bring dessert, she said. Henry makes excellent berry cobbler. That evening, sitting at Thorne's dining table with Tommy chattering excitedly and Henry shyly answering questions about his studies, Clara felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the possibility of home. Not just shelter or safety, but belonging. Thorne caught her eye across the table, raising his glass slightly in a private toast. To new beginnings, his expression seemed to say, to whatever comes next. Clara raised her own glass in response, letting herself believe, just for tonight, that happiness might be possible after all. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, Alice's retaliation, the ranch's continued division, her own tangled feelings. But tonight, in the warm light of Thorne's dining room with laughter filling the spaces where silence once reigned, she was simply Clara, sharing a meal with people who might, someday, become family. The dust had barely settled from the confrontation in town when changes began rippling through Thorne Ranch. Elias Thorne, the man who'd hidden behind closed doors for 3 years, suddenly became visible in ways that startled everyone, including Clara. He appeared at sunrise to work alongside the hands, mucking stalls and mending fences. He organized meetings in the main barn, listening to concerns and implementing suggestions. When the new doctor visited Henry, Thorne sat with them, asking detailed questions about treatment plans. Small acts, but revolutionary from a man who'd ruled from distance and silence. He's different, Amos observed one morning, watching Thorne help Tommy with his reading on the porch, like someone lit a lamp inside him after years of darkness. Clara, grinding herbs in her familiar rhythm, said nothing. She knew the weight of being someone's light, how heavy it could become, how easily you could be blamed when the darkness crept back. The changes weren't just in Thorne. The ranch hands who'd stood by Clara during the troubles had formed a protective circle around her. Joshua, despite her gentle rejection, remained steadfastly friendly. Silas taught Henry to whistle like the cowboys. Even the new hands, hired without prejudice, treated her with professional respect that felt like luxury after months of suspicion. But it was the quiet moments with Thorne that unsettled her most. "You're overworking that mint," he said one afternoon, appearing at her garden plot. "It'll go bitter if you grind it much finer." Clara looked down at her mortar and pestle, realizing she'd been pulverizing the same leaves for minutes while lost in thought. "You know about herbs." "Eleanor taught me." His wife's name came easier now, though still weighted with memory. "She said I had good hands for delicate work. I think she just wanted company in the garden." He knelt beside her, picking dead leaves from the basil with surprising gentleness. They worked in companionable silence until he spoke again. "I've been thinking about what you said, about seeing you clearly." He didn't look at her, focused on the plants. "I want you to know I'm trying." "I know." Clara's voice was soft. "Change takes time." "I have something for you. Well, for the greenhouse." He stood, brushing dirt from his knees. "Come see." He led her to a wagon near the greenhouse where workers were unloading crates. Inside were glass panels, pristine and perfectly cut. "To replace the clouded ones," he explained, "and expand the growing space. Winter's coming, and you'll need room for all the medicines people are requesting." Clara ran her fingers along the smooth glass, calculating the cost. "This is too much." "It's practical. Morrison says half the county wants your remedies now. This is business." But his eyes were warm, belying the businesslike tone. "Thank you." She met his gaze, foreseeing the potential. "I'm learning that's what you do," he said quietly. "See potential where others see weeds." That evening, as Clara and Henry ate their simple supper, her brother surprised her with an observation. "Mr. Thorne's sweet on you." Clara nearly choked on her soup. "Henry." "Well, he is. Tommy told me he catches Mr. Thorne staring at you when you're working. And he smiles now. Silas says he hasn't smiled in years." "People are kind for many reasons," Clara said carefully. "Don't read too much into it." But Henry's words echoed as she lay awake that night, remembering the way Thorne's fingers had brushed hers when showing her the glass, how his eyes lingered when he thought she wasn't looking. The next test came from an unexpected source. Alice Whitmore arrived at the ranch in her finest carriage, ostensibly to commission remedies for her mother's arthritis. Clara met her at the greenhouse, wary but professional. "I hear your medicines are quite effective," Alice said, examining the drying herbs with affected interest. "My mother insists I procure some, despite my reservations." Clara measured ingredients carefully, aware this was another kind of battle. 2 drops in warm water, morning and evening. More won't help faster and could cause stomach upset. "How thorough." Alice's smile was sharp. "You do seem to have a talent for getting what you need through careful doses. Medicine, sympathy, protection. If you have something to say, Mrs. Whitmore, say it plain." Alice's facade cracked slightly. "Very well. What will it take for you to leave? I'll pay your debts. Relocate you and your brother somewhere comfortable. San Francisco. Perhaps Denver, anywhere but here." Clara stopped measuring, meeting Alice's eyes directly. "Why do you care where I live?" "Because you're upsetting the natural order. People have places. Miss May, when someone forgets theirs, everyone suffers. Like when a rich woman pays thugs to harass someone who's done her no harm." Alice went very still. "I don't know what you mean." "Then we understand each other perfectly." Clara handed her the wrapped medicine. "That'll be $3. Alice threw the money on the counter and swept out, but Clara had seen the fear beneath her anger. The natural order was indeed upset, but not in the way Alice thought. Change was coming to Dust Hollow, slow but inexorable as spring floods. That change accelerated over the following weeks. More townspeople came for remedies, some grudgingly, others with genuine warmth. The preacher's wife brought her colicky baby. The schoolteacher sought headache powder. Each interaction was a small victory, a thread in the new fabric Clara was weaving. But the most significant change was in Elias himself. He began sharing stories over dinner about his childhood in Boston, his journey west, meeting Eleanor at a church social. She was terrible at dancing. He confided one evening while Henry and Tommy played checkers. "Stepped on my feet through 3 songs, but she laughed at herself so freely. I was lost." "How long were you married?" Clara asked gently. 7 years. We tried for children." He paused, pain flickering across his features. "The last pregnancy killed her. The doctor said another would be dangerous, but she wanted so badly to give me a son." Clara's heart ached for him. "It wasn't your fault." "Wasn't it? I could have been firmer, refused to." He shook his head. "But she was so happy when she knew. Right until the end, even as she bled." He stopped, jaw tight. Without thinking, Clara reached across the table, covering his clenched fist with her hand. "She made her choice. Women do, make choices about what risks are worth taking." He turned his hand palm up, interlacing their fingers. "Is that what you're doing, taking a risk?" Before Clara could answer, Tommy burst in. "Mr. Thorne, come quick, star's foaling and something's wrong." The moment shattered. They rushed to the barn where the mare lay in distress, the foal positioned wrong. Doctor Morrison was 20 miles away, and the veterinary knowledge among the hands was limited. "I've seen this," Clara said suddenly. "Mrs. Holbrook helped deliver babies sometimes. The principle's the same." She turned to Thorn. "Trust me." He nodded without hesitation. "What do you need?" For the next hour, Clara worked with steady hands and calm voice, guiding the frightened mare through the difficult birth. Thorn stayed at the horse's head, soothing her, while Clara carefully repositioned the foal. When the baby finally slid free, alive and breathing, a cheer went up from the gathered hands. "That was amazing," Joshua breathed. Clara, covered in blood and fluids, hair plastered to her head, felt anything but amazing. Then she saw Thorn's face wonder and something deeper, more dangerous to her carefully guarded heart. "You saved them both," he said softly. "We saved them," she corrected, but her voice came out breathless. Later, after she'd cleaned up and checked on the mare and foal once more, Clara found Thorn standing outside the barn, looking up at the stars. "My father would have said it was unseemly," he said without preamble. "A lady involving herself in livestock birth. Good thing I'm no lady then." He turned to her, expression serious. "You're worth a dozen of their ladies. You know that, don't you?" The intensity in his voice made her step back. "Elias, I know. Too much gratitude, obligation, complications." He smiled wryly. "But Clara, I need you to know what I feel isn't gratitude. It's not obligation. It's—" "Don't—" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Not yet, please." He nodded, respecting the boundary even as his eyes said everything his words couldn't. "I'll wait, as long as you need." As Clara walked back to her cabin, she felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. The walls she'd built were crumbling, and she wasn't sure anymore if that was disaster or salvation. Inside, Henry was reading by lamplight, looking healthier than he had in months. He glanced up with a knowing smile. "Good night." "Eventful," Clara said, kissing his forehead. "Sleep well." But she sat up long into the night, thinking about choices and risks, about a man learning to live again and a woman afraid to let him. Through her window, she could see lights still burning in the main house and wondered if Thorn was sitting up too, wrestling with his own ghosts and hopes. Tomorrow there would be new challenges, Alice's next move. Ranch work, the endless balance of surviving and thriving. But tonight, with the memory of Thorn's hand in hers and the miracle of new life in the barn, Clara allowed herself to imagine a future where happiness wasn't just possible, but probable. The autumn air carried the scent of sage and coming rain, and somewhere in the darkness, a newborn foal took its first wobbling steps. Life persisting despite all odds, perhaps that was the lesson. Perhaps that was always the lesson. Clara finally banked the lamp and went to bed, her dreams full of starlight and steady hands, of roots growing deep and flowers blooming in unlikely soil. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, with a crispness in the air that promised perfect autumn weather. Clara stood at her cabin window, watching the sun paint the distant mountains gold, hardly believing this day had come. 3 weeks had passed since Elias had proposed, not with grand gestures or flowery speeches, but with simple honesty while they worked side by side in the garden. "I want to build something with you," he'd said, hands deep in soil as they transplanted winter herbs. "Not because you need saving or I need healing, but because we're better together than apart. What do you say? Clara, will you marry me?" She'd said yes with dirt under her fingernails and tears in her eyes, and he'd kissed her there among the rosemary and sage, tasting of hope and new beginnings. Now, as she prepared for the ceremony, Clara's hands trembled slightly. Henry, almost fully recovered and dressed in his first proper suit, watched her with worried eyes. "You're not having second thoughts?" "No." Clara smoothed her dress, a simple but elegant creation in soft blue that Mrs. Morrison had helped her make. Just first wedding nerves. A knock at the door interrupted them. Clara opened it to find an unexpected visitor, Elias's mother, Margaret Thorne, a formidable woman who'd arrived from Boston the week before. Her silver hair was perfectly coiffed, her bearing regal. but her eyes held warmth. "I have something for you," she said, producing a small velvet box. "If you'll accept it." Inside lay a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. Margaret opened it to reveal tiny portraits, Elias as a young man, and space for another. "It was my mother's," Margaret explained. "Elias sent word of you months ago, long before he proposed. His letters. I hadn't heard such life in his words since before Eleanor. I knew then you were special." Clara's throat tightened. "Mrs. Thorne, Mother," the older woman corrected gently. "We're to be family now." As Margaret fastened the locket around Clara's neck, she whispered, "Thank you for bringing my son back to the living." The ceremony was held in the meadow between town and ranch, a compromise that allowed everyone to attend without taking sides. Wild flowers bloomed everywhere. Tommy and the other ranch children had spent days gathering them under Amos's supervision. Simple benches made from ranch lumber provided seating, and a bower of woven branches and late roses marked where the preacher would stand. Clara arrived to find the meadow fuller than expected. Not just the ranch hands and their families, but townspeople too. Dr. Morrison and his wife, the schoolteacher, the preacher's family, even some who'd whispered against her months before. The wall of prejudice, while not destroyed, showed significant cracks. Joshua stood near the front, and when their eyes met, he smiled genuinely and tipped his hat. He'd been courting the blacksmith's daughter lately, finding his own happiness. Silas gave her a rare smile, while Amos wiped suspiciously at his eyes. But it was Elias who took her breath away. He stood beneath the bower in a black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, his dark hair neatly combed but already rebelling in the breeze. When he saw her, his composed expression cracked, revealing wonder and joy so pure it made her steps falter. Henry, serving as her escort, squeezed her arm. "Steady on. Almost there." The ceremony itself was simple. Reverend Jackson spoke of love as choice and daily commitment, of building something together stronger than either could manage alone, when he asked for the rings. Tommy stepped forward proudly, having guarded them all morning. "Clara," Elias said, sliding the plain gold band onto her finger. "You saw worth in me when I'd forgotten it existed. You brought life back to barren ground, and not just in the garden. I promise to see you, truly see you, every day of our lives, to stand beside you in hardship and joy, to trust your strength as you trust mine." Clara's voice shook slightly as she responded, placing his ring. "Elias, you offered shelter when I had none, but more than that, you offered respect. You saw me not as someone to save or own, but as someone to stand beside. I promise to choose you, again and again, in darkness and light, in plenty and want." "By the power vested in me," Reverend Jackson declared, beaming, "I pronounce you husband and wife." The kiss was gentle, a promise more than passion, but the cheer that erupted from the gathering could likely be heard in Dust Hollow. As they turned to face their community, Clara saw something remarkable. Alice Whitmore standing at the very back. Face unreadable, but present. A tiny crack in the highest wall of all. The reception was held at the ranch, tables groaning under Amos's finest efforts. Fiddle music filled the air, and even the stuffiest guests found themselves tapping their feet. Clara changed into a simpler dress for dancing, and Elias spun her through reel after reel until they were both breathless with laughter. During a quiet moment, as Clara rested on the porch, Alice approached. She looked uncomfortable but determined. "I'm Mrs. Thorne," she said formally. "I owe you an apology." Clara studied her carefully. "Do you mean it?" Alice paused, then sighed. "My mother takes your arthritis medicine. She hasn't been without pain in years until now. And I've watched Thorne these past months. He's different, better. Maybe I was wrong about natural order." It wasn't a complete capitulation, but it was a beginning. Clara extended her hand. "Perhaps we could start fresh. Alice shook it briefly. Perhaps. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Elias made an announcement that stunned everyone. Clara and I have discussed how to move forward together, he said, his voice carrying across the yard. Starting next month, we'll be implementing new policies at Thorn Ranch. Fair wages for all workers, medical care for families, and education opportunities for the children. We'll also be opening a clinic in town, with Clara overseeing herbal medicine alongside Dr. Morrison's practice. The implications were staggering. Ranch hands looked at each other in amazement. This wasn't just kindness, it was systematic change, using Thorn's wealth and influence to reshape their small corner of the world. Furthermore, Elias continued, his hand finding Clara's, the old prejudices that have divided us have no place here. Man or woman, born here or arrived yesterday, all who work honestly and treat others with respect are welcome at Thorn Ranch. The cheer this time was complicated joy mixed with uncertainty, hope wrestling with generations of assumption. But it was a start. Later, as the celebration wound down and guests began departing, Clara found herself in Eleanor's former garden, now thriving with medicinal plants and late-season vegetables. Elias joined her, jacket discarded, tie loosened. No regrets, he asked softly. None. Clara leaned into his warmth. You? Only that it took so long to find you. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Eleanor would have liked you. I think she believed in shaking things up too. You still miss her. Part of me always will. First loves leave marks. He turned her to face him. But you're not competing with a ghost. Clara, what we have is entirely ours. Tommy ran up then, Henry close behind. Can we set off the fireworks now, please? Elias laughed. Fireworks? Amos got them from a traveling merchant, Tommy explained breathlessly. For celebration. As the night sky exploded in color and light. Clara stood surrounded by her new family, Elias's arm around her waist, Henry and Tommy whooping at each burst, ranch hands and townspeople mingling in ways unthinkable months before. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Tomorrow there would be resistance to the changes, resentment from those who preferred the old ways, challenges in building the clinic and implementing fair practices. Alice's tentative peace might not hold. Some wounds were too old to heal completely. But tonight, as fireworks painted the stars and her husband whispered promises in her ear, Clara allowed herself to believe in the possibility of transformation. Not just her own from despised charity case to respected partner, but the transformation of an entire community, one choice at a time. I love you, Elias said against her hair, the words still new enough to send shivers through her. I love you too, she replied, meaning it with every fiber of her being. As the last firework faded and guests began heading home, Clara noticed a small group of women approaching wives of ranch hands, a few from town. They carried a quilt, each square different, clearly made by many hands. For your new home, the eldest said shyly. We thought, that is, welcome to the family, Mrs. Thorn. Clara accepted the quilt with tears in her eyes, understanding the significance. She wasn't just accepted, she was chosen, claimed by the community she'd fought so hard to join. That night, in their bedroom in the main house, Clara traced the strong lines of her husband's face in the lamplight. We did it. No, he corrected gently. We started it. The real work begins tomorrow. Then we'd better rest. She smiled, mischief dancing in her eyes. Tomorrow we change the world. Tonight, we just change each other. As he pulled her close, Clara thought of the wild roses blooming against all odds in the harsh western soil. Beauty and strength intertwined. Thorns protecting tender hearts. Roots growing deep and branches reaching toward sky. They were like those roses. She and Elias unlikely, but inevitable. Proof that love could bloom anywhere if tended with courage and care. Outside, the ranch settled into peaceful darkness, but change was in the air, carried on the autumn wind like seeds of spring flowers yet to come. 1 year later, Clara stood in her expanded greenhouse, sunlight streaming through the new glass panels onto rows of thriving medicinal plants. The morning air carried the sound of children's laughter from the schoolhouse they'd built near the main barn, where Miss Patterson taught ranch children alongside those from town who chose to attend. "Hey, Mrs. Thorne, I can't get the comfrey tincture to set properly," young Sarah Mitchell said, one of 6 women now learning herbal medicine under Clara's guidance. Clara moved to examine the girl's work, her movements confident and sure. "You're grinding too fine. Here, let me show you." As she demonstrated, she caught sight of Elias through the window, teaching Henry and Tommy to repair a fence. Her heart still fluttered watching him. This man who'd transformed from grieving recluse to community pillar. The changes at Thorn Ranch had rippled outward like stones thrown in still water. The clinic in town now served patients 3 days a week, with Dr. Morrison and Clara working side by side. The fair wage system had attracted the best workers in the county, and other ranches were beginning to follow suit, if grudgingly. "Clara," Amos called from outside. "Visitors coming!" She wiped her hands and stepped out to see a familiar carriage approaching. Alice Whitmore had become a regular visitor, though their relationship remained formal. Today, she brought someone unexpected: her mother, the formidable Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, matriarch of Dust Hollow Society. "So you're the woman who's turned our town upside down." "The elder Mrs." Whitmore said, leaning heavily on her cane but eyes sharp as a hawk's. "I prefer to think we're turning it right side up," Clara replied evenly. The old woman studied her for a long moment, then laughed a surprising, rusty sound. "Good answer. My arthritis medicine, if you please. And perhaps we could discuss your clinic's expansion. I may have some funds to contribute." Alice's eyes widened. Her mother never contributed to anything that didn't directly benefit the Whitmore name. Clara, wisely, simply nodded and led them inside. That evening, as the ranch gathered for supper, Clara reflected on how much had changed. The long table that had once hosted silent, masculine meals now rang with conversation. Families ate together, women's voices mixing with men's, children permitted to speak and laugh. "Remember when you first sat at this table?" Joshua asked Clara. His wife, Emma, beside him. They'd married 2 months prior, and Emma had quickly become one of Clara's closest friends. Scared as a rabbit but trying not to show it. "I wasn't scared," Clara protested. "You were," Elias said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "But you came anyway. Bravest thing I'd ever seen." After dinner, Clara found herself walking with Tommy through the herb garden. The boy had grown inches and gained confidence. No longer the uncertain orphan, but a cherished son in all but blood. "Clara," he said suddenly, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "Would it be all right if I called you Ma, not because I forgot my real mother, but because you feel like one too?" Clara's eyes misted. "I would be honored. Tommy." He hugged her fiercely, then ran off to join Henry, who was demonstrating some card trick he'd learned. Watching them, Clara remembered those desperate days above the saloon, when keeping Henry alive was all that mattered. Now he was strong, smart, talking about studying medicine with Dr. Morrison. "He's right, you know," Elias said, joining her. "You are his mother in every way that counts." "We both are," Clara corrected. "Parents." Something flickered in Elias's eyes, hope mixed with old pain. They'd been trying for a child of their own, but each month brought disappointment. Clara knew he feared repeating the past, losing her as he'd lost Eleanor. "Whatever comes," she said softly, taking his hand. "We already have a family." The next morning brought unexpected drama. Marcus Cole returned to Dust Hollow, not sneaking but bold as brass, with a group of men who shared his views about the natural order. They set up camp just outside town, spreading poison about Thorn Ranch, corrupting traditional values. "Let me handle this," Elias said, his face dark with anger. "No." Clara put a hand on his arm. "We handle it, together, like always." They rode into town with a contingent of ranch hands, men and women both, a deliberate statement. Marcus stood in the street like a gunfighter, his followers arranged behind him. "Come to your senses yet?" "Thorn," Marcus called out, "ready to stop playing house with social experiments." "The only experiment," Elias replied calmly, "was thinking fear and prejudice could run a community forever. Those days are done, Marcus." "Are they?" Marcus's smile was ugly. "Maybe the good people of Dust Hollow need reminding what happens when the natural order gets upset. Diseases, moral decay, economic ruin." "The only disease," Clara interrupted, stepping forward, "is hatred. And we've found the cure: respect, fair wages, an opportunity for all." The crowd that had gathered murmured. Many were patients from the clinic, workers who'd benefited from the new policies, women who'd found independence through Clara's teaching. But others looked uncertain, fear flickering in their eyes. Then Alice Whitmore stepped out of the bank, her mother beside her. "Mr. Cole," Alice said coolly, "you're no longer welcome in Dust Hollow. My husband's bank will not serve those who threaten our community's peace." One by one, others stepped forward. The preacher, the school teacher, Dr. Morrison. Shop owners, a united front against the poison Marcus offered, faced with a community that had chosen progress over prejudice. Marcus and his men had no choice but to leave. "This isn't over," he snarled at Clara. "Yes," she said simply. "It is." As the troublemakers rode away, the town seemed to exhale collectively. People drifted back to their business, but something had fundamentally shifted. They'd been tested and chosen unity. That night, Thorn Ranch celebrated quietly. In the main parlor, Clara played the piano. Elias had surprised her with another skill misses. Holbrook had taught her long ago. The melody filled the house with warmth as ranch families gathered, children playing at their parents' feet. "You did it," Margaret Thorne said, visiting again from Boston. "Both of you. You've built something remarkable here." "We all did it," Clara corrected. "Every person who chose courage over comfort." Later, alone in their bedroom, Elias held her close. "Do you ever regret it, the simple life you might have had somewhere else?" Clara laughed softly. "Simple? When has my life ever been simple?" She traced the lines of his face, still marveling that this complex, wonderful man was hers. "I regret nothing. Every hard moment led me here, to you, to this life we've built. Even if," he paused, and she knew he was thinking of children again. "Even if," she said firmly, "we have Tommy and Henry, we have the ranch families, we have each other. If more comes, wonderful. If not, we're already complete." He kissed her then, pouring all his love and gratitude into the gesture. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, he whispered, "How did I get so lucky?" "Not luck," Clara corrected. "Choice. You chose to see me that day in the rain, chose to offer hope, chose to change, every day. We choose each other in this life. That's not luck, that's love." As they settled for sleep, Clara heard the night sounds of the ranch cattle lowing, horses nickering, the distant hoot of an owl. Once, those sounds had seemed foreign, even frightening. Now they were home. She thought of her mother, dead so young, who'd whispered to her about dignity and strength, of Mrs. Holbrook, who'd taught her that healing hands could change lives, of all the women who'd been told they were too poor, too low, too nothing to matter. "We matter," she whispered to the darkness, "all of us." Morning would bring new challenges. There would always be those who resisted change, who preferred their prejudices to progress. The work of building a just community was never finished. But tonight, in the arms of a man who saw her truly, in a home built on respect and love, surrounded by a community they'd helped transform. Clara May Thorne knew the truth. Dignity wasn't granted by others. It was chosen, claimed, and defended every single day. And she would keep choosing it, keep fighting for it, keep building a world where every person could stand tall regardless of their birth or bank account. Because that's what love did. It spread outward, transforming everything it touched, like wildflowers taking root in the harshest soil and blooming despite all odds. The moon rose full over Thorne Ranch, bathing the thriving gardens in silver light. In the greenhouse, medicinal plants grew strong. In the schoolhouse, books waited for eager minds. In the homes scattered across the ranch, families slept peacefully, knowing tomorrow would bring fair wages and respect. And in the main house, Clara smiled in her sleep, her hand resting over her belly where, though she didn't yet know it, new life had finally taken root. The next generation who would grow up in a world their parents had fought to change. The wild roses climbed higher on the garden wall, thorns and blooms intertwined, beautiful and fierce and absolutely unstoppable. Thank you so much for listening to this story of Clara and Elias, of transformation and courage in the Old West. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss what this tale of love conquering prejudice meant to you. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more stories of hope and humanity set against the rugged frontier. Don't forget to like this video and hit the hype button to help more people discover these tales of the heart. Until next time, keep riding toward your own horizons.